Welcome to the Church of Mabus radio show. It's Friday night, 7:05 p.m. Central. Listen to United Public Radio 107.7 FM New Orleans. And let's see here. I just want to go over a few guest things going on. Then we'll get to our guest. Daniel J. Dukes here, Secret History of the Wild West. We'll be starting with him very soonish. We're already starting with him. I'm just going to read a couple of guests real quick. August 5th is Kate Johnson. We got J.M. I'm sitting on that one. August 12th, Richard Grossinger. He's been around a while, kind of a UFO book that he wrote. Used to own North Atlantic Publishing. I'm in one of his books. But August 19th, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. That's a kind of a weird one. A guest that's on Coast to Coast a lot contacted me on that Alignable one on the show. And then he's like a scientist with a school for gifted children and all this stuff. It's like some X-Men stuff, I guess. Wow. But we'll get into that one. And then the 26th, we don't have a show. And then Wham comes back for Gail Lynn and Mana Subahani. I know Mona is paranormal like stuff. And Gail Lynn's some like meditation kind of situation. And let's see. I'm trying to do October. Right now I got Steven Snyder. That's a friend of Stephanie's on serial killers. I got you for that one, Wham. And I'm waiting on Flowers to pick a date. And that's either going to be the 7th or 14th. And I know he said yes. He's just picking the date. But that's on I need to make sure I get you a copy of his book. It's a Nazi occult book. Okay. But it looks like it's like $40 and huge and creepy. So
$40 huge and creepy. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, well, Nazi books are always creepy, but it's just like it's exposing them, I guess. It's not like pro-Nazi, of course, which we know that, but but for our audience and Daniel. but all right, yeah, Kyle. Just kidding. Yeah, werewolves of the SS. Nazis are creepy. We're not pro-Nazi.
Yeah.
But nonetheless. And I do think there are some Nazis in Ukraine, but I don't think everyone there deserves to die because they're there. And there's some in the U.S., so we don't all deserve to die because there's some Nazi a-holes here. You know, it's like don't nuke the whole place.
That reminds me of that line from the Blues Brothers. I hate Illinois Nazis. So
yeah. Well, all right. The book is Secret History of the Wild West, Outlaws, Secret Societies, and the Hidden Agenda of the Elites. Daniel J. Duke, author of Jesse James and the Lost Templar Treasure. It's great to have you back, Daniel. How you doing?
I'm good, and thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure. I'm honored.
So, just to give everybody kind of a primer, what is your relation to Jesse James?
He was my great-great-grandfather.
Yeehaw. Nice. That's cool. I mean, that's pretty cool. And so how did you come across that, find it out? I mean, what were some of the inklings of it as you were growing up that you found this stuff out?
Well, my late mother, Betty Dorset Duke, she wrote 3 books about it. When she'd always, growing up, she'd always heard the story that, Jesse faked his death, came to Texas, and lived in Evans, Texas. And, everybody said it like it was a fact. It wasn't a big deal. But usually when families got together, they'd tell that same story all her life. And when she got time, after me and my brother and sister were in high school, she had some free time on her hands. So she decided to start researching because, the history books say one thing, but the family lore said another. And she wanted to know who was right. History or the accepted history or the family story. So she started researching it, and I would help her when I could. My sister helped her a lot. And she ended up proving with family photographs. We had all these family photographs, and we looked at them, and it's like, God, those are the same people. And she took them to the Texas. It's basically the state police for Texas. It's Department of Public Safety, their forensic lab. And they verified that our family photos matched historically accepted photos of Jesse and his family. So then she took them to Austin Police Department forensic lab. they verified it as well. And the third one was a group out of New Jersey. I think it was New Jersey at the time. It was Visionics. They were world leaders in facial recognition technology. Now they're called, or they got bought out by another company, Identics. But anyway, they also verified that our family photos matched the accepted historical photos of Jesse and his family. So we had that, and Mom thought, oh, everybody's going to be so happy when they find out he wasn't betrayed by Bob Ford. And so she came out in a Texas Monthly magazine with an article about it. Long story short, the people up in Missouri at the James Farman Museum didn't want to hear anything about it, and they just kind of blew her off. So she thought, well, I guess I need more proof, and we kept digging. And we had his diaries. We started researching all the names in his diaries, and it unopened. What is it unopened? She not only proved that Jess did fake his death and died, and they accepted history wrong. It also opened doors to stuff we never thought we'd get involved in, or even we would have never even thought of it. We were warned by two men who kept following us. Every time we were at the state archives in Austin, there were two men who were always there, and they're always watching us. And one day the librarian told my mother and I, don't sign the registry book. And we said, why? And he said, they're watching. We said, who? And he just turned around and walked off. So I thought, okay, this is weird. And we sat down. Those two men came up and introduced themselves. One was a former cop from Dallas, and the other one was a researcher. He introduced himself as a house painter first. Then the second time we met him, he gave me his card. He was a researcher for the Texas State Park. And I thought, this is a weird duo, and it's just weird. Why are they warning? They warned us not to mention names that tied in with the Texas power structure. And they didn't say what would happen. They just said, you don't want to do that. So I asked them my mother and I asked them who the Texas power structure were. They just kind of laughed and said, you'll find out. And we never were contacted by anyone identifying them as part of it. But it was just that. And I'm probably running off down a rabbit hole. But they.
Oh, you're good. Well, you obviously said screw them, because the whole book's about hidden agenda of the elite. So is that like a football?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to write about that, but I was given the okay by a man who I will not mention. I won't name his name, but another guy gave me the okay, and I'm certain that group has got more sway than the other people representing.
And
that's all I'll say. That's where the rabbit hole. So,
and everybody, he has a book that goes deeper into that, which is the book he wrote, Jesse James and the Laos Templar Treasure. You can find that one on the archives at Church of Mabus and listen to it for free if you want to get into that heavier. But right now, one of the ones that I don't have that big of opportunity to talk about Wild West. I think you're it. Maybe like one other person who I can't remember right now. So I've always liked Billy the Kid, and I remember seeing Young Guns, and it had an influence probably too much when I was in junior high. And I enjoyed the movies. I mean, I remember seeing those and looking into the history and all that stuff from it and all that crap. But what got you started with Billy the Kid? And there's also the fact that he supposedly, faked his death as well. So, I mean, what can you tell us about Billy the Kid?
Well, there's everything around Jesse seemed everything around him isn't as history says in a lot of cases. I mean, up until through the Civil War, history's got it down, and most of his robberies, history has it down. But around the Northfield raid is where they actually, at the Northfield raid, they start getting the accepted history is pretty much all wrong. That's where it starts getting real full of holes. Jesse, for example, wasn't at the Northfield, Minnesota raid. That was his cousin Wood Height, who was also the man who was killed and passed off as Jesse. And that was Wood Height, his first cousin. Where Billy the Kid comes in, after the Northfield, Minnesota raid, after it had failed, he had been wanting out. He wanted to live a peaceable life. And a lot of people don't know that Jesse tried to fake his death in 1879, which was the same year. It was July. I believe it was July of 1879. He went to Las Vegas, New Mexico, and met up with Billy the Kid. And there's historical records, and I've listed a few in my book, that at the end, Billy the Kid in Las Vegas, New Mexico. And they kind of leave it at that. Jesse, some say he was trying to reform a new, and Billy the Kid fit the mold, and they could have continued their robbing sprees and criminal career. But I have a feeling, and there's no fact on that, there's no written records, but that they had shortly after that meeting, Jesse tried to fake his death, claiming he was shot dead by his fellow gang member George. There was no body, so nobody believed it, and that death hoax, attempted death hoax that he perpetrated to try to get away, that failed. No, so but in 1882, Jesse faked his death, and that wasn't purposely. That time, his got shot by Bob and Charlie. Woodhite looked a lot like he was in a love triangle with it was just Woodhite was sleeping with Bob and Charlie's sister, Martha Bolton, and she was also sleeping with her farmhand, Amanda Gibson. Well, Wood and Jim got in a fight. Wood, Jim, and Bob and Charlie, they started shooting at Wood, and Wood caught a bullet in the back of the head. So it was a big mixed up story, but it was a big fight over one woman. But two men died, and that was a perfect time. Or it was Jesse didn't want it. He didn't send anybody out to kill him, but it was perfect for him to fake his death. Nobody really knew what he looked like, so he faked his death. The law, the people been chasing him. The best in the nation, the Pinkerton Agency at the time, they didn't have an accurate description of Jesse, and the only word they had to go by was former gang members, friends, and family. All his gang were close friends and family, so they weren't going to rat him out. His family, and there's a lot of holes in that I went into later. I also did that in our second book with my sister. But Billy, around the same time, supposedly shot by his friend and former fellow gang member Pat Garrett, and it just seemed they both died, and it's almost like a carbon copy death. I leave it kind of open because I never got. I was about Jesse, our last 25 plus years, we've only been researching Jesse and those right around him. But then Billy the Kid enters the picture. And the funny thing is, the guy named Brushy Bill Roberts, who a lot of people are showing that he was Billy the Kid under an alias. He lived a day's ride by horseback from where Jesse lived in Blevins, Texas. And then Bell Star, for example, lived about the same distance from Jesse, just north of where Billy lived. And that you start all these key figures connected to each other. Supposedly they all lived in the same part of Texas. And it just that you keep researching more and more, and there's too much for it to be a coincidence, in my opinion. I answered your question. I fight real hard to keep from going off down rabbit holes because there's a million rabbits on just about every topic on this.
You're muted, Jeffrey. Jeffrey, you're muted.
There we go. The dogs are barking, so I forgot. But anywho, I saw the Brad Pitt movie. That was actually pretty good. But I mean, it had the same situation with Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid from like the other movies we've seen, and I know what you mean by that. But and it's always like I forget the name of that movie, something the coward Robert Ford or something like that. But
yeah,
it was actually pretty good.
Yeah, and I liked the movie. It was the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. It it was a pretty good movie, but they painted Jesse as the guy who wrote the book that was based off of. That man was never a big fan of Jesse, and he took the historically accepted route, which was an easy route. He had no reason to disbelieve it, as most people wouldn't. But so I can't fault him on that. And some historians get mad at Hollywood for tearing up a story, but at the same time, it's about entertainment. And if people are interested in the entertainment, then they'll dig deeper into the story and find out the truth on their own, or want somebody's version of it. So
definitely. And I know it's just interesting how these Wild West stories have that story where it's like a person they have pissed off or betrays them or whatever, like the Wild Bill story, like that movie with Jeff Bridges plays Wild Bill, which is pretty good as well. There's a little, a-hole guy. I think it was David Arquette or something, and finally he shot him. But it's just interesting, these little stories like that. But as far as that's neat that they kind of live together in that area and everything. And I know in the Young Guns movie, Bushy Bill Roberts, that's the old man they show, right?
Yeah. That was the old man, Brushy Bill Roberts. And he supposedly, according to that legend, he lived in Hyco, Texas. By horseback, it's almost a day's ride from where Jesse was living in Blevins, Texas.
That's definitely very, very, very interesting. Who was Belle Starr again? I remember you saying that name.
A lot of people called her the Bandit Queen, and she was a lot more than just a bandit. I mean, she had love affairs with several famous outlaws. It's claimed that she loved Cole Younger. She supposedly had a crush on Frank James. I'm not sure how true or untrue that might be, but she other than just being a bandit queen, she had contacts who ranged. I'm looking for the words. Her contacts ranged from the worst of criminals and hitmen to well-respected judges and politicians. She knew, and everybody in between. She was the woman who, when you needed something, she knew how to get it done. If you needed a herd of cattle, she knew somebody who could steal it for you, and she could arrange it for a fee. I mean, she was almost like a mob boss in a lot of ways. And in her own right, she was probably much more of she was more amazing, in my opinion, than a lot of historic figures in that day. Men and women. I mean, if you needed something done, she could get it done. And I thought, well, if that's the case, it doesn't. Knowing that Jesse was well acquainted with Belle Starr, she was even at his wedding. We've got a family photo of that in Blevins, Texas. She was also acquainted with Billy the Kid in various aspects, and there's legends and there's also historical truth to some of that. She was. Knowing that she could facilitate just about anything, and she knew all the people to do it, it's not hard to believe that she could also help arrange faking a person's death or hiding them afterwards.
So Frank was his brother, right? Because I see there's a book, Frank and Jesse James. Like he had another brother, right? That rode with him, right?
That's right. Frank was older than Jesse, just a few years older.
And when you found these diaries and stuff, were they like passed down from your family, or just you came across them through other means?
They were through the family. The diary we have is from 1871 until 1876.
Wow.
And when I say diary, it was more like a day book, because he didn't ever talk about his feelings and stuff like that. He just wrote down the facts, where he was, people he was with, different names, and there's a lot of known James gang members in that day book. And he also signed his name. He signed his name, his alias, James L. Courtney, and he also signed his name as Jesse James is in his signature is in the book, and also his initials JWJ.
What is this daily leader on page 26, it says he dined with Jesse James and Billy the Kid. Who's that about in the newspaper? It says someone dined with them.
Yeah, that was a famous doctor back in the day, and he had been according to that story, he had been in Las Vegas. He went in and sat down and had dinner with. It was a friend of Billy's, and he was sure as to who Jesse was at first. And after Jesse left, Billy told him, that was Jesse James, and I thought that was a real cool story.
Yeah,
I just wanted to add that in there. I added it. Well, it showed the connection, but I also thought it was just a real cool story. The difference, and I've also always been interested in the differences of all the outlaws. Like Billy the Kid, for example, when he went into town, you pretty much knew he was in town. Whereas Jesse shied away from towns. He didn't go around saloons. He'd go around towns. He always tried to avoid. And then you've got guys that I didn't write about John Wesley Hardin, but John Wesley Hardin, I would view him almost on the level of a serial killer because he went into towns looking to kill somebody. He's the guy who shot a man for snoring one night.
Yeah.
Pretty mean guy.
And what do you mean by outlaws with a higher purpose? I mean, I know that's complex, but what's the outcome of that?
That would tie back into a lot of what I wrote about in the first book with the Templar, Freemasons, and the treasures associated with the Freemasons and the Knight Templar. Jesse was a Freemason under his alias, and I can't find any proof that he was a Freemason as Jesse, but he was under his alias. Now, I've talked to a lot of Freemasons in the Blevins area, older gentlemen. One who knew before Jesse died. This old gentleman's name was George Roming. He was about 10 years old, and Jesse hired him and swore him to secrecy to help him bury some gold with some other elderly gentlemen. George was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite, and which I am now also. Their ties with Freemasonry, there's a lot of history behind the scenes that a lot of people don't realize that. And also, like the Templar, back to the Catholic Church, when the way the Catholics persecuted the Templar, who were a part of the Catholic Church at one time, then they turned on them because they wanted their wealth. And so did the King of France at the time. Well, when that happened, that set off a series of events that even go throughout today, and not as drastic as back then, but there's been a lot of cases. It's the way I look at it. It's like a war that turns from cold to hot at different points throughout history. The Catholics do something, the Masons do. So somebody gets mad and it goes hot, but it's always behind the scenes. It never seems like it's out front and in the open. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but the Outlaws, Jesse, not all the Outlaws, but Jesse was a Freemason. I know Pat Garrett was a Freemason, the guy who allegedly killed Billy the Kid. And I don't know about Billy, but I do know a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of the robbing that Jesse and others were doing were for, it was part of that war, that cold or hot war, depending. And at his time, there were actually up until about the 80s, there were a lot of times where it almost grew hot.
And turned into a bigger situation. I know I'm looking at the picture of the new faces in an old photograph, and that was some of the findings where you found new information from the photograph, right?
Yes. Which photograph are you looking at?
Figure 5.1, page 40. Sarah Jackson, Susan James Palmer.
Yeah, that's the wedding photo.
Okay. Jesse and Frank's in it. Zarelda, family and friends, Blevins, Texas.
Yep.
I know there was some kind of new Billy the Kid picture that came up. Do you remember seeing anything about that anywhere? Some kind of new thing that went around about Billy the Kid not too long ago. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah. They were playing if that's the one I'm thinking of, Billy. They were playing I think croquet. some kind of game that people wouldn't associate with an Old West outlaw, but it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I have to look it up because I remember seeing something about it. I didn't get to watch that Billy the Kid show. I have it. I just haven't watched it. But new photograph or something. I remember something about it because I think they did like a. Yeah, there it is. It's them playing. Yep, croquet. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a trip for sure. True West magazine. It has him. He looks the same almost in every picture, like the same kind of face and everything. It looks like he has
Yeah, yep. He always has a look like he's amused.
Yeah, well, it looks like he has a poncho on or something.
Yep.
You got any Western relatives, Wham, in your DNA?
No, actually, I don't.
Me neither, I don't think.
Actually, I don't.
Maybe some natives, but other than that, that's about it.
Actually, I don't. This is not an area that I know a great deal about, except that, I mean, one of the things that I'd be interested in you talking about is you're talking about the elites. Can you say anything about those elites? Who are those elites? Can you reveal anything about them?
Well, like, LBJ, for example. I don't know. I stopped at LBJ just because I didn't want to make the wrong people mad today, and I didn't want to go any further than that.
And are you just talking about Texas? Are you just talking about Texas, basically?
No, the whole nation.
Okay.
Well, Texas, I know a lot more about, but it ties in with a lot. Well, world history in a lot of cases. Like with LBJ, for example, former President LBJ, he was part of it. Billy Saul Estes who I've met personally in Granbury, Texas. Billy Saul was said by a lot of people to have been, well, he was they call him a con man. He was the first man to be acquitted for murder because cameras were in the courtroom. When I met him, he didn't come to meet me. We were at an exhumation of a grave in Granbury, Texas. And he was there, and former Attorney General Wagner Carr was there. Now, Wagner Carr was also a friend of LBJ. Billy Saul and Wagner Carr, who are both now passed away, they both claimed publicly they didn't know each other. You know, he knew of him, but didn't know each other. We saw them, and I personally saw them. They were back in the back corner of that cemetery just laughing and talking and having a great time until all the reporters started showing up, and they just kind of separated and went their own ways. And but Billy Saul came up and introduced himself to my mother. Very nice, very gentlemanly like. Seemed like a real friendly guy other than the two big bodyguards he had with him. And they didn't seem nice. That's their job, I guess. But they were tied in. Billy Saul was supposedly said by many to have been LBJ's hitman in some cases. Others claim he was, just a con man and a mobster from Dallas. He used to sell. He was notorious for a while, but one of his crimes was selling non-existent fertilizer plants to foreign and northern investors. He was making a ton of money, and LBJ used that as funding. But where that ties in with the research I was talking about is, and I never got a lot of answers. I would ask them questions like, why would they be at an exhumation of a person who had anything to do with Jesse James? I never, it's to me a legitimate question. They'd always smile and dodge the question. But digging into that, BJ, there was a treasure in New Mexico they call it Victoria Peak treasure. And there were billions of dollars of gold found there by a man named Doc Noss. Doc Noss ended up being assassinated. He was shot in the back of the head during daylight in New Mexico. And the guy at the time, LBJ was a senator. He was heavily involved. According to a lot of people, of course, it's hard to get any proof. He was heavily involved with the treasures in Victoria Peak. Well, I thought, okay, why did he have any more knowledge other than there was treasure there? It's mentioned in the Watergate hearings, the treasure at Victoria Peak, and so that also ties in with Nixon. So that's two presidents that were tied in with a treasure that was also linked back not only to Jesse and Billy and them. I don't believe Jesse or Billy buried that treasure, but that treasure was buried back in the 1500s or earlier. And it ties in with Freemasonry and the Knights of the Golden Circle, Knights Templar. I believe that's where the treasures originated. A lot of them did. And it seems to tie in, it not only with politicians, presidents, hitmen, attorney generals, it ties in, and aside from the secret societies, it also ties in with the Baptist Church and others. But I specifically mentioned the Baptist Church in their Baylor University because I know for a fact from interviews, there was a treasure dig in Waco, Texas, and contacted the newspaper about it. They never would say a word. Then the news, we were asking them just questions. I said, "Well, there's a treasure on. It's in your backyard. Do you know anything about it?" And they wouldn't answer us back. So we went up there and we knew the man who owned the land, and he introduced us to the guys digging for the treasure, but they were real close mouthed. After the guys, one of the laborers was selling some of the scrap metal that they'd left behind. And he came to us, real nice guy, told us that Baylor University paid for that dig. They didn't get anything there, but he thinks they found where it was, and that's all he knew. A few years, and so I found a gravestone to it was a lady's name. When you're doing this, things that get out of the normal. I mean, you're looking at a cemetery, but anytime it involves this stuff, there's always something that seems to it seems out of place. There was all the gravestones are facing east, towards the rising, except for this one in the corner, and it was dated 1914 on one stone and 1911 on another. And that was weird. I put a picture of it in my book. It's got some symbols all. I got on Google Earth with all and used the template I'd been discovering. That treasure the codes on the tombstone line up to a spot a mile due south of that headstone. And that was right on the banks of the Brazos River in Waco. Like 3 years later, 2 to 3 years later, Baylor University dug a big hole right there on that spot that I had located. I thought, okay, this is getting tricky. Because I wasn't sure if I was right or wrong until that started happening. That was a 50-yard line brand new football stadium. And I thought, oh my God, this is insane. But it goes deeper. There are treasure maps by certain people that were years ago, and you can probably find them online. You can find them online, I know for a fact. One is alleged treasure buried in Waco by Jesse James. Art claims Jesse buried it. It's supposed to be a safe that's full of gold, jewels, silver, and information that leads to other precious treasures around the nation. It's a one that one leads to 13 treasures, or that's one, like the keystone to 13 other treasures. So that what I was getting at is that it's getting so crazy. It's like it reminds me of a spider's web. But anyway, that's the Baylor connection and all the other stuff on that, all on that treasure map. It stated there was a treasure a mile south on the banks of the Brazos River. And that was a mile south of the original old bridge from Waco. And it blew my mind that it was all tight. It all led to that spot. I was just proud to know that I located where it was. I mean, yeah, I'd love to add some, but it just, the knowledge from putting what I'd learned to the test and knowing that I was right, or having strong indications that I was right on the money, just that made me extremely happy. And then after I wrote my first book, having the current Grand Master of the Knights Templar write a glowing endorsement for my book, and he himself said I had cracked part of the code to the Templar treasures that originated in the temple at Jerusalem. That was that was the best compliment I could have ever had. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a specific question. It was just
Okay. Well, it goes a lot deeper, and it gets a lot deeper than that. There's President Truman was involved. I know Nixon, just because mention of the treasure in the Watergate hearings, that seems to indicate Nixon was involved. But I know Truman and LBJ both were definitely involved in the treasures, and I think it was just them carrying on a plan that had been set in motion from the days of the Templar and Sir Francis Bacon, and some of the founding or the fathers of Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism.
And what do you mean by the stealthy? I know this is probably complex, but stealthy war between the secret organization and its opposition that has been waged in the shadows for centuries. What are some of the polarities there?
That would be Masonry, Freemasonry, and their allied societies, like Rosicrucians, for example, and the Catholic. Not so much the people of the Catholic Church; it's more the Vatican. All of that. The Vatican has a long tradition. It's basically two or more powers, two sides opposing one another for the same thing. It's power, and I don't know that there's a lot of gray areas. Like any war, there's always going to be gray areas, and it's hard to figure out sometimes who started what and who did what, whose fault was it. So I always go back to the beginning. It looked like the Vatican, the Pope, and King Philip the Fair in France they wanted the wealth. They got greedy. They turned on their own people and the Templar, and that's what started the whole thing. So I always go back to that to see where it started. Now, all the gray areas in the middle, I don't think there's angels on either side. I think there's good and bad on both sides. But I do, I think the Masons and the Rosicrucians, like Sir Francis Bacon, John Dee, and a lot of the others, were in the right just because they were all the different groups that the Catholic Church had persecuted throughout the centuries. They wanted a place where they could have liberty, freedom of religion, who they wanted to, in the way they wanted. And the Catholic Church stood as a major obstacle to that. Back then, I mean, if you went against them, you could lose your head. Just for speaking your mind, you could lose your livelihood or your life or both. And the shadow part would be all the political games that fall in line with the struggles for power.
So just off the cuff, you may not have anything for this particular question, but have you ever had any paranormal stuff come up from getting into some of this kind of stuff, or weird dreams or ghosts or anything strange?
That's funny you mentioned that. I'm on a paranormal hunt right now. Well, my girlfriend and her team are on a paranormal hunt in Palestine, Texas tonight. That's why I'm here.
Nice.
So, yeah, I hope I'll be up all night. I'll probably be up till sun up tomorrow. Just everything that involves it ought to be pretty cool. And I like the way my girlfriend follows it because she's got her degree in physics. And they're all very intelligent. They're not, there's some groups out there. It's like the wind blows a leaf or a door or something, and they think, oh, ghost. Well, they try to they try to disprove everything they find, and that's what I admire about that. Just trying to narrow it down and disprove it, and if they can't disprove it, they dig deeper. And I always like that approach.
Well, that's one of the main reasons we do the show. Is when I was younger, I had testicular cancer at 17, and then later my dad died a few years later, and I had a lot of paranormal stuff happen to me. So we do UFOs, ghosts. We have serious people from like BFRO about Bigfoot, and that stuff gets crazy as hell. Just some of those, and I love it. And I was just curious, but that's cool that they're doing that for sure. But some ghost stuff. I know there's have you ever been to like ghost towns and stuff, or visited any around the Western ghost town? I've never been to one, but I've heard of people having, experiences at that kind of stuff, old saloons and stuff like that.
Yeah, I've been to the ruins of a lot of ghost. Well, kind of, they're not like the movie ghost town, but I've been to ruins of towns. I haven't been to one of the really cool old ghost towns yet. But there's a lot of ruins and different communities. A lot of stuff happened, and then the whole community it came to nothing. And you can find like old wells. Usually just all that's left of a lot of the homes are the stone chimneys.
And I don't know if you heard him, but his girlfriend and them are out doing a paranormal thing right now. That's why they're on the road. So some kind of paranormal adventure. But it's definitely fascinating, especially when you can get into so many different things. One of the weird things I like about the West is there's a fiction genre called Weird West. And we've had Joe R. Lansdale on, and he writes some, but there's a lot of comics like Jonah Hex. Like you'll have a Western story, but throw in some kind of weird creature, and that's called Weird West, like a vampire or a werewolf.
Yeah. Have either one of you ever heard of Lordsburg, New Mexico?
What's it called again?
Lordsburg, New Mexico. Years ago, I came across that while I was researching, and there talk about some wild stories. It was old cowboys in the Old West chasing pterodactyls across the sky and shooting at them. Just all kinds of weird. There's supposed to be a portal. According to this one legend, there's a portal that opens up, and next to where the portal opens up is a tree stump with a human leg bone embedded in the center of the tree stump. And it's just weird stories. They said that town is just full of weird stories. And if you go there, they said you can talk to the locals and they act like, it's just a normal everyday event. All the weird stuff that's going on there. It's like some kind of time. So there's all kinds of theories. Some people think it's a time portal, portal to another dimension, all sorts of stuff.
I'll have to save it. I found a tourist picture of it with the logo on it, so I'll save that and look it up. But I've heard some weird stories from cryptozoologists about pterodactyls over native reservations and weird stories like that.
I know a guy who I've heard some people claim, when they see Mothman. Now, there's a lot of that. I like to keep an open mind on everything, so I don't tell people they're wrong. I've seen some strange things in my, but I know one guy who believed, and it was a man who had interviewed me. He thinks Mothman may be one of those pterodactyls or something related to that. I'm not sure. I always like listening to everybody's theories.
There's a lot of different theories for sure about different things. And then there's Skinwalker Ranch. I don't know if you kept up with that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
there's a lot of weird stuff there as well.
I've often wondered if Skinwalker Ranch has to do with an entity of some kind or maybe a skinwalker. I believe a lot of things in the spiritual realm. I discount anything.
Well, the one interesting thing there is people get radiation burns. So is there like a nuke or something, atom bomb buried there? Like there's been some serious radiation poisoning and burns there and meters going off and crazy stuff like that. So there might be something buried there, but they've dug there and haven't found anything. I've only seen the first season of that show, but I've read the book, but I haven't read the second book. There's a book, Hunt for the Skinwalker, by George Knapp, and I forget the other dude, but there was just recently another book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon or something, a sequel to it. I haven't read that one yet, but I have it.
Wow.
But definitely some interesting stuff. So who are some other Wild West characters that you could tell us about that maybe we haven't mentioned that you enjoy or you might have some info about?
Well, like Johnny Ringo, he was a relative of Jesse. I don't know if you saw the old movie Tombstone with Val Kilmer, the others.
Yes.
Johnny Ringo.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about Johnny Ringo, I thought it was cool. He'd passed through the area where I grew up long ago. And I was reading the history books of a neighboring county. Right after the Civil War, a lot of Union supporting German ranchers had they supported the Union, and guys who'd fought for the South who were coming back from the war of rustling cattle so they could hang them and take their land and their cattle. And that one side of the story. But Johnny Ringo was in by a lot of the former Confederates and to take care. And they paid him to take care of it. He rode up to one of the wealthy Union supporting ranch homes, did on the porches. I think they smoked a or something, and he shot him in the face and rode on. So, it's just weird. From after that, he got arrested, and then 50 men showed up at the jail in Burnett, Texas, and they walked up to the jail. The sheriff just let him go, and he rode on to Arizona from there. And it's just, I like knowing all the stories around what had happened too. That always interested me.
Has anyone ever approached you for a movie of any of this or TV show stuff or anything like that?
I've been approached by a couple of people. One was a lady at, well, I'm not going to say her name, but it was a High Noon Entertainment for one. They approached me. They were talking about doing a TV show and just waiting for the right moments on stuff like that.
Cool. Definitely. I could see it. I know I've seen weird stuff with Jeff Mudgett and that H.H. Holmes where he thinks he's Jack the Ripper, and they do whole series on that. So, I mean, they could do a series easily on this stuff. And I've had Jeff on a few times. Definitely H.H. Holmes creeps me out. You're familiar with H.H. Holmes, the Murder Castle and all that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, not too familiar, but I'm vaguely familiar with it. So
they're doing a Martin Scorsese series on I think Hulu or something of that. With I know DiCaprio was possibly playing Holmes. I don't know if that's changed, but if Martin Scorsese's doing it, I definitely want to see it for sure. It should be pretty crazy, no doubt about it.
Oh yeah, that would be fun. I always love movies like that in books.
Yeah. Well, do you need to go now? Because I see you're on the run. If you do, it's
somebody
okay.
was knocking up. Yeah, okay. Somebody knocked on the door. I think it was one of the team members to see if I was ready or not. Okay. Don't worry. They're not. They'll wait on me. So I like doing this anyway. So
yeah. We got.
I like talking to y'all.
Yeah, it's fun, definitely. You don't get to do a Wild West show very often, or if ever. So grab it while it's good. But that's cool. They're doing a paranormal thing out there. So have you ever had anything paranormal happen to you? Anything?
Yeah, I've had a few things. Some of it I can't explain. A lot of it I can't explain. Like hunting. I used to hunt. I grew up out in the country in Texas. So while hunting, I'd seen some things that I couldn't explain. I don't know what it was. Then I've seen other things that looked like something that would be familiar, but the dimensions of it were much larger than it should have been. Just different things. And then stuff that happened afterwards. I don't want to go too much into it. I worry about saying stuff like that sometimes. I was going to show you that house. I don't know if you can see that house outside.
Yeah, I see one. I see a white house. Yeah, there we go.
That's an old house from the 1800s. That's where they're doing the investigation this evening. Cool. That ought to be fun. But when I talk, I usually don't talk about things I've seen just because.
I understand, because of the subject matter, and
and when that because I'm writing a book, and it's about it's about history that people usually aren't used to, and then if I start talking about that, people act like, oh, okay, and you get labeled and put off into a box. And
I understand.
But I do believe in a lot of that. I know what I've seen. I know a lot of it was unexplained. I know, I think there's a lot out there that people don't know about.
Definitely. Like I say, the biggest evidence for paranormal is you're going to croak and get ejected into the paranormal, hopefully, if you believe life carries on. So that's pretty damn convincing,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why people have a hard time believing it. They I've got friends who go to church all the time, and they act like, oh, you believe in ghosts, and it's like, well, you're talking about a Holy Ghost and stuff, And to me, that's kind of
Yeah.
they talk about it all the time, every Sunday. So
Well,
it just makes me wonder why they can't.
Their supernatural stuff is real, but yours isn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's always fun. And then I know friends who I know a lot. I grew up with a lot of people. They believe in a heaven, but not a hell. They believe in a God, but not a devil. They don't believe in demons. They don't believe, but they believe in angels. And to me, they're cherry picking in a lot of ways. And then there's a lot that's yet to be discovered, in my opinion.
Definitely. So, what do y'all do with all these diaries and stuff? You keep them in Fort Knox? I mean, obviously don't give too much info, but I mean, do y'all keep them somewhere in the family or?
Yeah, we keep them. They're in a safe space, and I like looking at them, but I've taken photos of them so I don't damage the diaries. We've all been doing that. We used to wear those white gloves until we found out the white gloves aren't supposed to. They used to say use the white gloves. They know the acid on the gloves can actually damage the paper. So we quit doing that. I thought, I'm just going to take photos of it and get that done. And once I do that, once I took all the photos, I put it back.
Cool.
Right.
I've been in the comics lately, and you got to be very careful when it's kind of like a pain in the butt. But because I had a bunch outside in the heat, and you got to be very careful. So I've been trying to move them to safer places, slowly but surely. But it's just neat how the weather affects all that stuff and everything. And I was just curious. So, what in the future are you planning to do another book about? What are you trying to do next?
I think you should write a book on Belle Starr.
I agree.
She completely fascinates me.
Same here. She is a lot of people. I mean, there's been books written about her, but I don't think most people have ever done her justice. She was an amazing person, and she'd done more than most men or women in a lot of different parts of history. Most men and women never do half or even a fraction of what she'd done.
Right.
And even she was a successful person. She was assassinated. Truly, she was riding her horse, and some coward was hiding in the brush and shot her in the back with a shotgun. And then after they shot her in the back, they walked up. The stories vary, but they supposedly walked up and finished her off with another blast from the shotgun. And that's how she ended.
Always some coward dickhead.
Yeah.
I see the only movie I see about her is 1941. I don't know if they've made any others, but that was the first thing that came up. 1941, Belle Starr.
Yep.
I mean, because she obviously had connections to the elite as well as these other folks. So it's like her story would shed a whole bunch of light on other things.
I think there's a lot of women throughout history that we may never know about just because of the way history was written. They were very integral parts of any spy organization. Anytime you have a war, you're going to have you're going to have men and women involved in that. Women have their own gifts that they can use to get information and all kinds of other stuff. I mean, they play just as an important role as any man did. And in a lot of cases, like my mom and my grandmother, my mom who raised me, I always thought every woman around me was always, I admire, I'm not going to say I didn't admire the men, but the women were usually levels higher than the men. I'm trying to put it as nice as I can. Every woman who raised me was much more intelligent and capable than a lot of the men. So I think that's an area in history that needs to be explored in great depth.
Women of the Wild West.
I agree with you. Lots of good stories out there that haven't been told yet.
For sure.
I agree.
And so we should probably close out. So we're doing about an hour. What do you have a website that anybody can check out?
Yeah, I've still got my late mother's website going. It's jessewjames.com. My name, I've got my website, and I'm always forgetting the address to my own website. It's Dan Duke Author. It's either dandukeauthor.com I'm sorry, it's danieldukeauthor.com. That's the name of my site. Or you can just Google my name, Daniel J. Duke Author, or Jesse James in quotes, and find it. And the website where my publisher's website is innertraditions.com. And I love that publisher. They also have got a lot of interesting books dealing with the paranormal as well,
Right.
which I think I love their book list. Every time I get a catalog, I end up half broke spending money on books. So.
For which publisher? Inner Traditions?
Inner
Or
Traditions,
yeah,
yes.
Inner Traditions.
Sure enough. Sure enough. All right. Well, we appreciate it so much, Daniel. It's been great having you on. We always love it. Keep us in the loop in the future for sure. If anything drops at the investigation, let us know. You can let them know you were on a show that we've had shows about UFOs with like famous Air Force captains and weird stuff, and nuclear physicists and craziness like that, like serious stuff like that. So we do those as well. But it's been great. Thanks so much, and enjoy your paranormal trip.
Thanks for having me on the show, and I enjoyed the talk. I enjoyed the show, and I'm honored. And y'all have a great weekend.
You too. Have a good one. Take care.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's see here. All righty. You're listening to United Public Radio, 107.7 FM, New Orleans. Let me pull up Stephen Flowers' Nazi book.
Nazi book?
Nazis. Those Nazis. Like Inglorious Bastards. Nazis. But the occult and National Socialism, the symbolic, scientific, and magical influences on the Third Reich. Dang, this thing looks like a phone book.
Basically, look it up here.
544 pages.
Jeez.
Lord, that's too much Nazis. But it's Flowers, so it's some good stuff. So, Don Webb's new book comes out in January. I was checking on that. I may have a blurb on that one. We'll see. I don't know if they used it, but he asked me to do one for it. So,
cool.
Flowers wanted me to get on the blurb list for this, but it was too late by the time I asked. They already closed the blurbage. I could have had a blurb on the Nazi book. Hopefully, I'll at least have one on Don Webb's book.
Here it is. The occult and National Socialism, the symbolic, scientific, and magical influences on the Third Reich. Yeah, I mean, it's like $40. Who's the publisher on that?
It's Inner Traditions.
Wow.
But yeah, Inner Traditions. Definitely interesting. Do you want it? Do you want a copy of it or a PDF?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if you can get a PDF, that's fine because I'm trying to reduce the number of actual books that I have in the house since I have like several thousand. As you can see behind me, this is like a small sliver of what I have, you know.
What did I just do to this thing?
I don't know. You made yourself really yellow. I don't know.
Oh my God. Wow, I got rid of you. What happened? Okay, there we go.
I'm gone. Okay,
I don't know what I did. I have too many books here to where it's insane. I need to go through them and get rid of some. It's like there's a lot of crappy ones that publishers send that are like sequels to fiction books that I've never read in my life. Like they'll send this stuff to you. I don't know what the hell I did.
What are you doing here?
I don't know. I hit something. I hit something I shouldn't have.
Yep.
Trying to fix it. There's Joanne Byer Benetti. That's Stephanie Benetti's mom. Is she listening right now? Say something if you are.
I'm yawning.
That's a strange one. Not her, but I'm just saying the story.
The story is strange.
Her daughter, I heard passed away, but I mean, I'm sure that's what happened because I don't know why anybody would say if it wasn't true, but I actually did a show with her interviewing. Oh, now I forgot the lady's name. The lady that's the Conjuring lady, the
Oh, yeah,
woman,
yeah. Oh,
and
yeah. Oh, yeah. What's her name? Perrine? Per,
yeah,
whatever.
something like that.
Yeah,
But the real Conjuring mother,
right.
and I'd heard that Stephanie passed, but I didn't know for sure because I didn't really see anything. But I'm sure it's true. I think Joe told me so. I mean, it's
Yeah,
true. But
I thought that Joe had mentioned that she had
what the
passed.
hell did I do? I don't know. Cut in half somehow, and I can't fix it. I don't know what I did, but screw it. I'm trying to figure it out, but I don't want to get too obsessed with it. But yeah, I'll get the PDF for that. It comes out in October. So.
Perrone, the Perrones.
Yeah, yeah. And
Andrea Perrone is who you're probably thinking.
yes, that's it. And I interviewed her about that whole thing. That was a big one for sure. Kind of a big, weird one. A long time
Yes.
ago. Many moons ago.
Many moons ago.
But Bellstar, I looked her up, said she was married to a gorilla or something, like a guerrilla warfare dude or something. I don't even understand why they'd have the feature split your cam in half. Like, so I don't know what I did. Just split your cam in half for no reason. Oh well, I'm just not going to worry about it because I can't figure it out right now. But running on low sleep and a crook neck. But no, I asked him about paranormal and he, was shocked that I asked him about it for some reason. Like, I'm at a paranormal thing. So I think he's with his girlfriend. Yeah, with his girlfriend. So he doesn't like normally do it, but he happens to be at a paranormal event situation. I've had some weird dogs. My camera's frozen completely right now, isn't it?
Your
Looks like
camera. Try to raise your arm. Try to raise your right arm.
It's not moving on my end at all.
Yeah. Your mouth isn't moving. So maybe something happened to your webcam.
I don't know. Weird. I'll just leave it be. I don't know what to do. I don't know what happened. I don't think I stopped it. Mute mic. Stop mic or cam. I didn't do that. So solo lay it. No, that's not.
Right, there you go.
I'm just leaving it alone. I don't know what the hell I did to it. But I've always been into the Billy the Kid story, but where are the natives at in all this? They don't got the treasure. Are they dead by now? I would think they would be involved somehow. That's when I forgot.
What I think is really interesting about it is that, I didn't know exactly how to posit this question to him, but there is the question. Somebody asked me that, I was talking about this kind of stuff to somebody, and they were like, well, what is all this stuff about treasure about? I mean, like, why? Why this obsession with Templar treasure? And I tried to explain to them, but I would have liked to have heard him explain that it actually has to do with banking and finances and stuff. And part of what was going on in the late 19th century was the United States sort of went from one banking crisis to another. And there was no central bank. And so regional banks and state banks and financiers held a lot of power. And that's sort of where hello, are you gone now? I don't know. Maybe Jeffrey went away. But in any case, the people who could control or knew where treasures were or knew where gold was could potentially control the sort of financial destiny of regions and of states. And so that's part of where all this obsession with treasure was. It's sort of like the hidden financial history of the world.
Are you there?
I'm here. Yes, I've been. Did you get booted off? Did you boot yourself off?
I did something and booted myself off by accident, but now I'm a different face.
Yeah, you are a different face.
So I don't know. I don't know what happened. We'll just keep it like this. My cam was acting weird for some reason. Maybe it unplugged. I don't know. But somehow I don't know. It's just weird. It just kind of froze for no reason. It's plugged in. I'll have to test it later and see what's going on with it. Hopefully, it didn't just die for no reason. which, why am I Michael Angley now? That's just weird. It's another host from the network. But well, I mean, that's the weird fascination with Hitler and banking and all that crap.
Oh
So,
yeah, absolutely.
and then they try to tie Putin into that now, like he's the new Hitler or something, battling the banking system and all this crap.
Well, he's just trying to get his. It's not that he's battling the banking system. He's just trying to. He's trying to get his piece. You know, he's like he's the controller of a syndicate. So he's just trying to, get his piece of the chunk or piece of in his piece of influence. He's no hero. People who make him a hero are friggin' nuts.
Yeah, that's for sure.
He's out for himself. He's not out for anybody else. There's no nobility there.
It's definitely crazy. Let's see what happens when I start cam.
Oh, see, he got booted off again. So that's what we were talking about. Anyway, I mean, we could talk a lot about the elite, and it depends on who you consult. I mean, if you consult somebody like Joseph Farrell, he believes that this thing about the elite goes back to beginnings of civilization and extraterrestrials controlling sort of the financial destinies of nations and things like that. Where, it's a little. I personally find that far fetched. Whatever,
Yeah, I've interviewed him before about Nazis a long time ago. But that was a long time ago. Maybe one of the first shows we ever did on here when we first started. Is Richard Hoagland still alive? I've never heard anything about that.
I don't know if he is.
I didn't hear that he died, but I sure don't see much from him anymore. No, I used to hear that name all the time. Oh, he's still alive. Used to do some pretty weird stuff about wait, what is this?
What are you talking about?
Some I don't know if this is the right something about the scandalous disappearance and reappearance of Richard Hoagland. The story of an average family man's secret life that destroyed lives. Is this the same Richard Hoagland that maybe it? I don't know. It came up under his name. So it's kind of weird. Because a long time ago, I heard a weird story about him ripping someone off or something weird like that. Like staying in a house when he should have left and doing weird stuff. So I don't know. This may be the same dude. This may be the story. It's just kind of a weird thing that popped up from medium.com. The scandalous disappearance and reappearance of Richard Hoagland, but I'm not sure. You would think it would mention
I'm seeing Richard Hoagland missing, and then Richard Hoagland obituary. So hold on just a second.
well, okay. Let's see. It's kind of a weird.
Oh, come on, dude.
That's a different Richard Hoagland missing. I see that.
Yeah, I think that is a missing. Is a missing.
Richard C. Hoagland is his name, so that might narrow the thing. I heard from someone a long
Oh, here it is.
time ago something weird, like he was staying at someone's house and something crazy.
No, it's Richard C. Hoagland.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same Richard Hoagland.
He's still alive.
Here's his site.
Okay, yeah, it says here. Oh, here's Here it is. In 2011, researcher Andrew Johnson, that's an interesting name too, created an in-depth point-by-point denouncement of Hoagland's misappropriation of his and Judy Wood's work in a speech given by Hoagland in Amsterdam. At various points in his nearly 3-hour lecture, Hoagland presented various theories, research, and data originally and previously created by Wood and or Johnson as his own. So basically, he plagiarized a bunch of stuff. At various times, including on a 2013 Coast to Coast AM broadcast, he has claimed that the idea to drop a feather and hammer simultaneously on the moon was his. In fact, the stunt was conceived primarily by Joe Allen with some help from Dave Scott and Jim Irwin, and his own digital broadcast. On his digital broadcast, he claimed to have coined the phrase, "On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog." And a simple check of the facts shows that Peter Steiner first published this phrase in a cartoon in 1993. So basically, he's sort of been he's been proven to be a plagiarist, I guess.
I heard a weird story about he lived with some lady and ripped her off and wouldn't leave and trashed the house or something a long time ago. I was looking at UFO Watchdog. This guy still puts stuff up here, I guess. UFO Watchdog. It's been around for a long time. Dr. Bruce Goldberg. I've heard of that name. It's just a place where they talk crap about alien people that are frauds, supposedly. I don't know how. Wait, Art Bell's on there? Yeah, it's saying he's one too. So, I mean, I don't know who runs this one. Stephen Greer, Ed Dames, Richard Bolin. I've heard that. Sylvia Brown, Stephen Bassett, UFO Watchdog. There's still Paula Harris. I've always heard Michael Horn was, but I don't know who runs this thing. I know it's been around forever. Prophet Yahweh. Don't put the holy substance in the doo-doo. That's Prophet Yahweh. Stan Romanek.
I remember him. I remember
God.
he was one of the strangest people.
Yeah, he got busted. You know the story about how he got busted?
No, I don't. How'd he get busted?
He was, well, besides being a pedo, and he got busted with pedo stuff and went to jail. I don't know whatever happened with that, but I know he went to jail. He was on a camera, and he didn't realize it was recording his hands, and he would throw stuff and say something paranormal happened.
Oh,
and he didn't realize that
it was all being recorded.
Yeah. And he knew he was on cam, but somehow he didn't realize the cam was picking up his hands. And he got busted. But why I knew he was a fraud was because he did the same thing on my show, but at the time I didn't have a cam. But he made a noise and, was like, oh, an alien threw something in here or something. It was questionable to begin with. But
sorry, that's just weird.
He got busted. I know he got beat up supposedly by Men in Black, which is probably a lie, of course. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. I don't see the busted video anymore where he gets busted. Somebody might have took it down. Oh, God. He had a documentary on Netflix that was on there. It was like pro all his stuff, but he was creepy. I've had him on the show, and him and his wife invited me to their house in another state. Of course, I never went there. Thank God. If I got roofied or something. But it was just weird. Claimed like possum aliens came to his house and stuff.
Possum?
Possum aliens.
You mean like with the big tail?
Yeah. They're like possum aliens that abducted him
and put them in their little pouches.
The sad thing is that was one of the fights me and Jeremy Vaney got over when I first started doing this. I had Stan on, and Jeremy got mad he was on the show because he didn't want him on or something, and we got in a fight. Jeremy was just like a dick. So I cussed out Jeremy Vahaney. And then it's like I wasn't really defending Romanek. I was like, I'll interview who I want to interview. The guy was on David Letterman, so I didn't think it was that terrible. But later, all this stuff came out about him later, and it just got creepier and creepier and creepier. Now he's out of jail after being busted for pedo stuff. Post it. Let's see if that weird video's anywhere. It's so funny. It's just him being busted doing stupid stuff on cam. I don't see it. Like they took it down somehow. It's not up anymore at all. I still wonder how he did that little alien. Like, I mean, I'm sure anyone could do that, but it did look neat. Somehow he faked a little alien in the window. You remember that?
Yeah.
It's stupid. But pedo, and of course now he's framed by the government. He was framed by the government. They put the stuff on his computer. He's just like the Tiger King of ufology. that's pretty much. They threatened to sue me because I talk crap about him. But I don't want anything to do with him. Creepy. I know Lisa Romanek was his wife, and I heard stories about their kids would like sit on his lap, and it was just kind of awkward, like kind of sexual weird, like at conventions and stuff. Like people would see him with his kids, and just kind of creepy. They had a lot of adopted kids. That's it. So that, of course, made it even more creepy. I remember people telling me that he was like, it was just kind of weird. They were just hanging on him a little too much kind of situation, which I don't know. I wasn't there, but I just remember stuff like that, weird stuff. He had several books. Now he's probably like in hiding. Loveland Alien Abduction, Arthur. Stan Romanek's. Arthur. Loveland Alien Abduction, Arthur. Guilty on one of 2 counts of sexual exploitation of a child. So distributing child pornography. Just he got busted. And then, of course, people believe that he got set up. I've seen people defend him, that he got set up, that he didn't do it. The government put it on there because of his alien abductions to hush him. It's just crazy. Crazy, crazy, crazy. I got to find another Halloween guest or two. Got to find somebody creepy.
Find somebody creepy.
October 7th. Well, hopefully Stephen Flowers takes the 14th, but I need one for the 28th. Got to get something big for the Halloween show. I try to do it all month. So
you don't have Don Webb on yet, right?
Well, I was trying to wait for his book, but I thought about it.
What book is that? What's his book coming out?
Let me look it up. Something about magic.
Of course it is.
Something about winter or something. I have it somewhere. Parts of it because I had to read it for the blurb. It's like a magical. Let me look up his email and I can find it. Not even sure if it was a finished copy. It was just kind of a. Where is he? How to Be a Modern Mage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, something like How to Be a Modern Mage. How to Be a Magician. Yes, How to Be a Modern Magus. Is that right? Magus or Magus?
No, yes. How to Become a Modern Magus, a manual for magicians of all schools.
Nice. And of course, that comes out in January, but maybe I can get him for the Halloween. I'll have to look. We'll just see what's going on.
Well, see if he's just willing to come and talk.
Yeah.
About some stuff, Yeah,
I'll find out. Let me get the Stephen Flowers date first set because then I'll know what dates are free and everything. But waiting for Stephen for the 14th, and I'll have to look into the 7th. I know last year we had Nathaniel Gillis on, which was kind of like a exorcist dude. That was pretty good, and got into some weird necromancy stuff with alien abduction and weird stuff. That was kind of weird. about implants
Right.
and all that stuff. Oh, stop it, dog. There's a dog here. Every time someone comes in the house, he barks 4 times.
Just
So
four times
it's
specifically.
very annoying. Like when you're trying to sleep. Started putting a collar on him that you can beep, but you can shock, which I don't like. I have never shocked him. I just do try the beep, but I've been lazy and not putting it on him. I just use it for the beep. I don't like to do the crazy shock. I don't use that part of it, but it'll make a beep and then he'll shut up. Like it'll a warning beep. he's
Yeah.
never been shocked. But sometimes I think about it. Would you stop it? Especially when you get woke up from it. But so I don't know. Let's see. I know Dacre Stoker was doing some crazy Return of Dracula comic that seemed pretty neat. I need to try to get that. You been doing anything paranormal-ish lately?
Well, what I've been trying to do, I mean, I've been working on my website because I did a new website. So I've been updating it. And it's finally deployed, and I've gotten all my interviews up on it. I've gotten my blogs migrated. I'm in the process of writing a blog right now. So that's sort of what I've been doing in my spare time with that. I haven't been doing a whole lot. I've been doing a lot of reading. I've been trying to catch up on reading that I had not done over the last few months because I've been busy with some other stuff. And there's a bunch of people associated with Stephanie Quick right now who, you know, they're just a bunch of people who are sort of on Facebook all together and connect all together with each other. And they've all started rereading Jacques Vallée's Forbidden Knowledge series. And so I just finished that kind of controversial Trinity book that he wrote with, what's her name? Paola Leopisa Harris.
Yes.
And I had a really interesting experience with that book because I read it at the very same time that I was reading a book about the Pueblo revolts, which is not something that a lot of people know about. It happened in like 1680, and it was the first and only time that a unified group of indigenous people in any area of the country rose up and drove out their colonizers completely for over a decade. Um, Basically, they had to come back and sort of be reconquered in a sense. And so it's a book that sort of goes into that as much as can be known about it. And what's interesting about the Trinity book and this Pueblo Revolt book is that a lot of the events occur in the same kind of general area in New Mexico. And so there's this kind of weird effect of reading about when you find out, for example, how close the Trinity site is to several of the indigenous reservations, and then the relationship of the two principal witnesses of this UFO case that they're examining in this book. The fact that these kids were of mixed indigenous Spanish heritage. It's just interesting. It's kind of like the two books sort of merged in my head. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of mystery surrounding both the stories about the Pueblo Revolt and about this supposed crashed UFO case. It's almost like the witnesses are similar in some ways. It's like these things happen, but nobody will talk about them. You know what I mean? It's just weird. Anyway, I'm sort of writing about it because it was just an interesting set of synchronicities. But those are the kinds of things that I'm doing right now. I'm kind of catching up on my reading, and haven't really had a lot of opportunity to to talk to Gail or anybody like that here. Um, but I'm sure that, you know, as soon as as soon as as soon as fall sets in here, I'll probably be doing some more stuff.
So it was like Pueblo Indians that fought off and kept thriving.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's basically if you look at New Mexico, if you look at like a map of New Mexico today, what you'll find is like the northern and middle part of the state is completely full of. All you have to what you do is in Google search, you put in Pueblo, New Mexican Pueblo, or pueblos, and what it'll do is it'll show you both where reservations are and where um, remaining pueblo villages are, because there are some villages that don't have reservations attached. It's just the pueblo itself that is kind of its own independent entity. You know what I mean? It doesn't have like a big reservation around itself. But yeah, basically, what happened in the Pueblo Revolt is that, and there's a story about it, but we really don't know a lot of the details. Um, but basically, there was a plot that was organized. This is the story. There was a plot that was organized by a guy named Popé. And Popé, they're not entirely clear exactly which Pueblo he was from. See, people tend to think that all the Pueblo indigenous people are the same, and they're not. They live in similar kinds of houses because they're all inhabiting a similar environment. But in fact, we're talking about like um, a number of dialects in like 3 or 4 different language families. Like even members of, say, the Yemes Pueblo and the Tewa Pueblo, who basically were of the same language family. Their dialects were so different from each other, and they may have only been 50 miles from each other, but the dialects were so different from each other that they couldn't understand each other. So we're talking about people that are actually quite diverse. And somehow Pope figured out a way of communicating to all of the pueblos, all the major pueblos, of a plan to rise up all at once, simultaneously, during the same time period, like the same 24 hours, simultaneously. And this is without mass communication. The only communication they had were runners that had a piece of knotted rope that they would hand to the different people at each elder at each pueblo and tell them to untie a knot for each day. And when they got to the one day, they somehow figured out how to do this, and they all rose up in the same 24-hour period and killed everybody. Like killed all the friars, massacred the Spanish colonists and drove them out. It drove all of them out, like literally to a person, drove them all out. And it's kind of an extraordinary story, because there's the story about Popé, but the details about how he did what he did aren't clear, because they weren't preserved anywhere. And there are some, they might be preserved in some oral traditions, but Pueblo people aren't talking about it. And it's more of a story of kind of like, we know this really important historical thing happened at this particular time, but we don't know like any of the details. It's really it's more of a story about the power of oral tradition, but also the power of silence, because the Pueblo people really believe in silence as sort of a religious or spiritual act. And you don't talk about unpleasant things in the past. You don't talk about the dead. You don't talk about things that you had to do to other people. Like if you had to be violent to other people, you don't talk about that, because you don't want to repeat that. And there's something, even though you needed to do that. There's also something shameful in it. So it's just interesting, and you juxtaposition this, what happened there, and then in the same basic area, you have this nuclear, that's where we started testing nuclear weapons. It's just kind of weird.
Where do UFOs fit in? They get in. That's the Jacques Vallée book, right?
Well, that's the Jacques Vallée book, because his whole thing is that if there is any veracity to this account, because if then basically, according to the account, these two little boys, Rime Baca and Jose Padilla, were out. Their family was close enough to the Trinity test that on the morning when the Trinity test occurred, the light from it woke them up and completely illuminated. This was like at 5 a.m, and completely illuminated the interior of their house, kind of like an unearthly light. And I think it was his mother, Jose Padilla's mother, I can't remember, was one of the boys' mothers that looked through, the keyhole in the door, just sort of it reflexively to look to see that if she could see it was causing the light, and it blinded her in one eye.
Wow.
And so they were very close to the radiation. They were less than 15 miles away, 15 or 20 miles away. And of course, they weren't told about that this was happening, right? Well, these two little boys, it was like a month and 2 days later after the Trinity test. And of course, after we had already dropped an atomic bomb on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but they were out counting cattle, or trying to keep track of cattle for their father, because they were on a ranch, the Padillas ranch. And they witnessed first, they heard kind of a weird sound and a bright light, and then they heard, like, it's been described as like a crunching noise, and they hurried to see it, and they witnessed the final descent of what they described as an avocado shaped craft that had crashed into the ground and had kind of created this gouge in the middle of the field. And I think, to me, the most interesting part of it is not the craft. I mean, you've got these two little boys, and they're seeing something that they don't have any idea what it is, right? I mean, they didn't even know about the Trinity test. They just remembered this weird light and rumbling sounds, and all that kind of stuff. They didn't know what it was. And but according to them, they hid behind some rocks. These are little boys. One of them was 5 and one of them was 6 or 7 or something. And they both witnessed these, I think it was 3 little creatures that seemed to come out of they didn't see them actually come out, but they were apparently associated with this object, and they were sliding. They weren't really walking. They were kind of gliding around, and they described them as looking sort of like praying mantises, insectoid kind of like.
Yes.
But the thing that most impacted them was that the beings were uttering these cries of distress. They were uttering these very emotional cries of distress, and seemed to be impressing. It was like the 2 little boys felt like they could pick up on the thoughts of these beings, and these beings were expressing sadness and despair and really intense emotions that apparently, even after all that time, when they were first telling the story to Paola, that it really affected them. So that's the thing that's really interesting to me. It's not even the craft so much, or the descent or anything. It's these little details like that, about, because those aren't the kinds of details that people who are just hoaxing accounts will talk about. You know what I mean? It's like that's what John Keel calls sort of an index of authenticity. There's something unusual here. Yes. And then it's supposed to be one of the one of the cases where there was supposedly certain metal objects or certain artifacts that were found, and one of which was preserved by the boys up until the time that they were an adult. Now, what is interesting about this piece of metal that they have, which they do have a picture of in here, is it just looks like a bracket. It just looks, I mean, if you just look at it, it just looks like a farm implement, okay? It doesn't look that remarkable. And in fact, Jacques Vallée, he assumed that it was probably because, according to the boys, eventually within a day or two, the military did show up, and they did secure the area kind of haphazardly. They did secure the area, and they did like throw some pieces of metal away or do some stuff, you know. And one of the boys, Jose, supposedly actually at some point when the soldiers weren't there, because they didn't set up a security, thing around, they didn't cordon it off, essentially, not at first. And so they were little boys and they were able to sneak around and, get into things. Well, Jose actually at one point allegedly went into the craft and he pulled this bracket off the wall using a crowbar. That's the claim. And when Jacques Vallée saw it, his first thought was that this wasn't extraterrestrial at all. It was maybe like a piece of something that the soldiers had put in there to help them with some of their recovery stuff. You know what I mean? For some reason. And he, because it just looks like a piece of a farm implement or something. It's not even that remarkable. But one of the things that he thought was interesting is that if it was just a regular terrestrial thing or just, something like that, he found it really odd that, a few days later and then a few weeks later, as the boys would hide this object in different parts of the house, that military types would show up looking for it. Saying we're missing, saying we know that somebody took something. So they, he said, if this was just a basic part, you have to ask yourself, why did the military want it? It's broken. It's not even useful for anything anymore. But anyway.
Just to think about them freaking out because they crashed and then they're going to get found out by humans, I guess. So I guess that's pretty horrific.
Or something. Yeah, or something. I mean, it's not clear exactly what it is. The whole story. I mean, I guess what part of it is that as I read the two stories that, the two books together, both of these stories have some really interesting questions in them and some really interesting issues about them. But both stories point to something real happening, like something actually happened, but it's impossible to get to the details. And they both have these aspects that are like dreams. You know what I mean? It's all about memory and dreams and trying to figure out like what it's like. We know something happened, but we don't know what it was exactly or what its significance was.
So that book has a lot of different cases, right?
Well, the Trinity book does. I mean, it has more cases in it. And he's disappeared again. It has more cases in it than just the Padilla case, the Baca Padilla case. He actually, Vallée actually compares that case to a number of other cases, including the Socorro case, the famous Socorro case, but also some cases that I'd not heard about, like the very famous, at least in Europe, the very famous what is called the Valensole case, which I had never heard of,
Yeah.
but apparently is really well known in Europe and was heavily investigated. And what's interesting about the Valensole case is that the reason he brings it up is because it has a number of features in it that are startlingly similar to certain features of the Padilla Baca case but there's no way that those boys could have, there's no way that those boys could have been influenced by that case because they were just too young when that happened. And you know what I mean? But there are some similarities to the two cases that he brings out. And the Valensole case is very well attested. I mean, it's considered to be one of the best and most investigated cases in Europe. I mean, the French, the French have spent a lot of money and time and a number of agencies studying it and looking at the physical evidence on the ground and all that kind of stuff. So he talks about some other cases where there's physical evidence, either objects or material left behind, or marks on trees, very clear marks left on trees and whatever. And one of the other things that becomes apparent in the book is that part of the reason why this case, as well as some other connected cases to it in New Mexico, were probably ignored is because of who the witnesses were. They were people who were living close to the Trinity site, like a lot of the indigenous people whose reservations, like the Mescalero Apache Reservation, is due east of White Sands. So, any fallout that would have happened would have eventually just floated like right over their reservation, but these two kids were, they were Hispanic and indigenous people. Nobody's going to believe them.
Yeah.
They're poor, they're living on a poor ranch in San Antonio, New Mexico, and that's part of the issue too, is that they're close to places where classified stuff is going on, and also their status, their racial and economic or ethnic status, kind of makes it so that people will tend not to listen to them. So there are a lot of just interesting sort of issues that come up in this book as a result of that. I mean, from Vallee's perspective, if this is a real case, if there's veracity to these witnesses, one of them has died. If there's veracity to these witnesses, then this is like 2 years before either Roswell or the Maury Island case, the Kenneth Arnold stuff that led to the Maury Island case. So he considers it potentially important for that reason,
I need to pick it up one year. So did you get over any Paula Harris weirdness from it, or you didn't notice anything weird?
All she really, a lot of people complain about her. What she's not actually doing any analysis in the book. All that she does in the book is she's the person who conducted the interviews. So, and she did that kind of work, hunting down witnesses. They were able to find a third witness to the incident, confirming at least some aspects of what had occurred. It was a cousin of these two boys, who was she didn't actually see the object fall or anything like that, but look at that, you figured it out.
Yes.
She didn't actually see the object fall, but she was present and around when some of the subsequent things happened, with the military coming, and she knew about the objects. She'd actually seen some of the objects. So stuff like that. Harris, she did all the background research. It was Vallee who was doing all the analysis.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, I think it was just loose, and I was trying to figure it out because you start to get OCD. Like, do I need to get a new cam before the next show? So you start freaking out, and like, I got to buy a new cam now, and blah blah blah. Something just got loose, so it seems okay now. I want to know what Jacques Vallée was doing at Skinwalker Ranch. If they're ever going to reveal that, I don't even think they did that in the new Pentagon, whatever Skinwalker.
Yeah, but no, I don't know. I mean, there were things about the book that I found interesting. Like, for example, he does have a list of like different types of the different sort of accounts of UFOs that have crashed or that are that drop material. like, some kind of, physical objects. So he does mention the Maury Island incident, which in previous books he's always talked about as if that was probably a hoax. And I think that, like, I certainly think that Kenneth Arnold thought that there was an aspect of it that was a hoax, and so did John Keel. And it's because there was clearly at the time, even at the time, there was clearly the involvement of intelligence services with it. So, I mean, Peter Levenda has talked about that, how Fred Criswell, the same Fred Criswell that later on shows up hanging around it with intelligence stuff during the JFK assassination, Fred Criswell is like the main contact between, the witnesses and of the Maury incident and Kenneth Arnold. And Kenneth Arnold gets a very clear sense at a certain point that he's being had somewhere. There's something fishy in Denmark, as they say, And so I was surprised to hear that he brought it up again. So I thought to myself, does he think that there's something here that needs to be investigated, or is he just bringing it up as an example of an interesting narrative? Because if you think about it, if you put the Kenneth Arnold sightings and the Maury Island incident and then Roswell sort of in a line, they're all happening like in the same month. I mean, it's from the middle of June to the middle of July, but they're all happening within a month's period.
Yeah, I know that Chase Koetsky told me they had to report to Bigelow when she was in MUFON, and they would go to UFO crash sites, and she was serious, but I mean, it's just kind of hard to believe when someone tells you that he was actually going to weird crash sites when he was involved with all that MUFON crap. And of course, he is with, bought Skinwalker Ranch, and now he sold it.
Yeah.
To Brandon Fugel, which I haven't seen the other 2 episodes. I saw the first episode. But it was weird because I saw the first season, not the other seasons. There's 2 more seasons. But the first season ends with them basically at a board table agreeing to meet with government spooks and share information. So it's a weird show. It's like they're basically saying, oh, we're going to meet with these government spooks and share information again on the ranch with the government. It's just crazy, but it's worth watching. The first season was interesting, but there was a lot of wounds. Like a guy got a head wound and burns. And what do you think causes radiation there? That's what I'm trying to figure out always.
Well, there's a lot of radiation in the West because there have been almost 900 underground nuclear tests in the West. And so radiation just sort of creeps up.
Yeah.
From time to time. It comes up through the water. So radiation.
It's there. It's radiated. Just go outside. I swear the sun here is so crazy. It does seem like it'll just burn you. Like it seems like it's too close to the earth or something in Florida. I don't know what it is. God, it's even hard to get in the RV with the air on and be comfortable during the day.
Yeah, well, it's climate change. I mean,
sucks.
It's climate change. It's been hot here too. It's been hot and humid here.
The ghost of Stephanie Benetti. It's her mother. But Stephanie used to talk so much on the phone and she'd repeat things, which is fine. People do that. But I would make up that a UPS was here and had to go. Like, UPS, got to go. Like, just to get away. She wouldn't. That was a long time ago. But she used to help Joe with the network.
Yes, I know. And he booted her because she got nuts or something.
Yeah, crazy. She had some weird sex group on Facebook she put me in that was really creepy.
A sex group?
Like a weird sex group. Chip was in it. Chip Pleasure, which is, I say Chip Pleasure, but he had a radio show. But one day I on my news feed, I'm like just, looking on my news feed and his slong comes up on my news feed because he posted it in the group. Like they were getting crazy. I got out of. They threw me out.
Good. Oh my God.
They threw me out of there because I didn't participate. I guess.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
I don't really go to many groups. I go to Church of Mabus group. That's it. I don't really go to groups that much. I see they're doing that UFO tarot. I'm interested in getting that from Greg
I
Bishop.
haven't seen that one.
Some kind of ufology tarot. There's like a Linda Moulton Howe card and stuff. But they're making it. I guess it's Greg Bishop and someone, but all right, everybody. Thanks for listening. I'm going to sleep. No, I'm probably not till later, but I'm tired. We'll see you next week.
See ya. Bye.
All right. Good night, everybody.